Welcome to Chapter 4 lecture, Stress and Emotion Regulation. We feel the emotions that we feel each and every day because throughout evolutionary history, they've helped us to survive. And we define emotion as an individual's perception of their experiences and responses to stimuli. This involves three things: physical arousal, cognitive interpretations, and behavioral expressions. So, emotion is very physiological and mental, and those work hand in hand. Everyone experiences the world around them differently, and our emotional experiences can vary from person to person. The three components of an emotional experience are: first, emotions are embodied. This means that emotions are physiological. We can feel them. So when we get angry, for example, our muscles tense. We feel that physiologically. Or when we get anxious, our stomach gets into a knot, right? Or we feel excitement. You might feel butterflies in your stomach. Emotions are also conscious cognitive experiences. Each and every one of us is typically very aware of the emotions that we're feeling at any given moment. And emotions are communicated through behavioral expressions. So we use facial expressions to communicate emotion, as well as our body language to communicate how we're feeling at any given time. Emotions and mood are different. So our emotions are immediate. Emotions are triggered by the presence of a stimulus. So something happens, we feel an emotion, or we experience an emotion. Whereas a mood is about what's lingering in the background of our lives. A mood is like an atmosphere, and it can be very slow to change. We can be in a very sad mood for a duration of time, and then experience an emotion, which is a reaction to an event, right? So we might cry because we picked up something that reminded us of someone who had passed. We might feel in an anxious mood at work because it's very hectic towards the end of the month and people are trying to get work done to meet quotas. But our emotions at work are triggered by something that happened. So maybe a deadline was missed and you start feeling fearful that you might lose your job because you made that mistake of not meeting that deadline. Or you might get angry at a colleague or coworker because they didn't do their part of they didn't lift their weight on a project. So emotions and mood are two different things. And emotions are immediate, whereas moods kind of typically last over a duration of time. We have 6 basic emotions, and these are joy, anger, sadness, disgust, fear, and surprise. And we also have what are known as secondary emotions, which basically are when your basic emotions blend together. So for example, you feel a secondary emotion of embarrassment. That's a blend of sadness and fear. You feel betrayal. That's a blend of anger, surprise, and fear. Or you feel nostalgia, and that's a blend of joy and sadness. And so you can see how basic emotions are foundational emotions, whereas our secondary emotions blend our basic emotions together with one another. When examining the physiology of emotion, you have to explore your autonomic nervous system. This is where everything is happening. If you recall from Lecture 2, I discussed how our autonomic nervous system bridges communication between your central nervous system, which is your brain and spinal cord, to your internal organs and glands. So all of this is done outside of your awareness and outside of your control. right? You have an emotion, and such as fear or anger, your pupils are going to dilate. Your sympathetic nervous system revs into gear here, right? Your heart is going to accelerate. You're breathing more rapidly. You're releasing glucose to help your body have enough energy during this emotional experience. And you're putting your body under a lot of stress when you experience an emotional situation, an emotional event. So much so that the way you express that emotion through laughter or crying or through other means helps you release the tension in your body of this experience. Now, after an emotional experience, your parasympathetic nervous system kicks into gear, and it tells your body it's time to calm down. And it's helping to repair your body as well in doing so. So your pupils constrict, and you're breathing less rapidly, your heart slows down, and your body goes back to normal with digestion and everything else. So emotion is very physiological as well as mental. So how you thinking about the emotion, typically, and how you're understanding an event or situation will typically influence how your body physiologically responds in that situation or to that emotion or the emotional experience you have. So some people might have more intense emotional experiences than other people because, again, our emotional experiences vary from person to person. How the autonomic nervous system releases neurotransmitters and hormones impacts our emotional experiences and the intensity of them. So, for example, you're experiencing something very exciting and you're feeling joy. Your body's releasing dopamine, which is the feel-good hormone. And in very high intensities, dopamine can have you feeling more intense enjoyment and excitement, but also strengthening those neural connections, developing in the brain associated with the memory of that event. So when you reminisce about the event, you might feel that same level of joy and excitement as you did when it initially happened. And this is also why we form such strong social connections with other people, because let's say after a fearful event or a very traumatic event that occurred, right, we all gather and group up and console one another over what happened with that trauma. So we hug, we hold each other, we're consoling each other, and through that process we're releasing our emotions, right? We might be grieving and very upset about something, but we're also releasing oxytocin, which is the social bonding hormone. So our hormones in our endocrine system, which are controlled by the autonomic nervous system, play an important role in our physiological experience of emotion. Brain activity and emotion is quite complex, and should we want to explore the structure of the human brain that's responsible for emotion, we'll first start with our amygdala. Your amygdala is located in the center of your brain, and it's two almond-like structures, one in your left hemisphere and one in your right hemisphere. The primary role of your amygdala is in processing the emotion of fear. And since it's part of our limbic system or animal brain, we know that this structure isn't unique to just humans. Other animals have evolved an amygdala, and it was evolved to help us survive. One example of our amygdala in action is if you're on a long hike, you're walking, and then out of the corner of your eye, you see something long and brown, and your amygdala knows that there's a threat, and it's telling your hypothalamus that there's a threat. Your hypothalamus kicks your autonomic nervous system into gear, in a fight or flight mode. So you're reacting to this thing that you've seen, right, while walking up the trail. And you get away from it, right? You react, you run off, and then you go back and you're calming yourself down because you did get bit. And you go to look, and you find out it was only a branch on the ground, not a snake. So your parasympathetic nervous system calms you down. But you can see how your amygdala played a role in identifying there being a threat and helping you activate a fear response. Your amygdala also helps you to read and understand the emotions of people around you. So we're very social creatures, and we've evolved to be so. And that's important because if we read each other, our facial expressions and body language, and then it's communicated to us that there's a threat in our environment as social creatures, right? We have to then activate our fight or flight response in order to survive. The next area of our brain, known as our frontal lobe, is responsible for our emotions and managing them, particularly. So your frontal lobe's that CEO of the brain, involved in decision making, and it's fully developed by the age of 25. So this is why we see a difference in how people of different age ranges manage emotions. When managing emotions in our frontal lobe, we engage in something called cognitive reappraisal, where we're thinking about the experience and how we're going to respond to it. And it's a deliberate, conscious effort to understand and manage our emotions. So we think and reflect, is it worth it for me to get so angry over this? And you're reflecting on what's going on in your environment, and that determines how you're going to behave, all right, and how you're going to respond to other people. Much of emotional communication occurs through facial expressions, and from our facial expressions, we can tell whether an individual is being genuine or fake. And our facial expressions can also be used to manipulate how we feel. So researchers who explore whether an individual is being genuine, for example, with a smile, have found that a Duchenne smile or a genuine smile requires the activation of muscles around the eyes and the mouth, not just the mouth. So when we look at a person who's expressing a Duchenne smile or a genuine smile, they are experiencing a full embodied emotion of joy or happiness. Whereas a person who's being more deceptive might only have activation around the mouth. And facial expressions can be used to manipulate our emotions. So if we're in a bad mood, according to the facial feedback hypothesis, if you are in a bad mood and you put a smile on your face, you tend to report feeling happier a little bit afterwards. So a smile can truly make you happy. And a smile, right? If you smile, if you're in customer service, you might know this as a trick. If you smile before you answer a phone call, you typically have a more pleasant phone call with an individual than if you're, in that same mood and you're just kind of like blah, or you're maybe a little depressed, right? So put a smile on if you're not feeling so great and see if that impacts your day. Facial expressions can also help us to empathize with one another. So if we copy the facial expressions of those that were consoling and those that we're having private discussions with, we are better able to empathize with them, understand where they're coming from, and be socially appropriate in those instances, right? You wouldn't want to laugh when your friend is, maybe crying or really in despair. So we try to mimic and copy one another as a way of showing that we empathize and we relate, and it helps us in forming stronger social connections. While cultures around the world may share some basic facial expressions, the ways in which cultures express emotion can vary. So our culture is something that shapes us. It's something that helps us understand social norms, and emotion is part of that. So we learn how to express ourselves and communicate emotion by way of the culture that we're brought up in. So within our culture, certain cultures have different ways of describing an emotion, because some cultures have to describe emotion because there's no name for that particular emotion. And so communicating about emotion can be quite difficult from one culture to the next. And how we express and display our emotion can vary, with some cultures being more expressive in how they display emotion, such as the individualistic culture that we're from. In America, we're maybe overly expressive, and that's socially acceptable in our culture. Whereas in more collectivist cultures, like Mexico, India, they're more reserved in how they express emotion. So research has found that people around the world are better at recognizing emotions from people within their own culture than recognizing emotion from those belonging to other cultural groups. So again, culture matters, and what you learn about emotion within your culture might be very different than what other people have learned about emotion within their own culture. And context matters. So James Carroll and James Russell have found that we use knowledge of the situation in order to interpret the emotions or the facial expressions on other people. There are 4 major theories of emotion that I'll be covering in this lecture. The first is known as James Lange theory. And this theory argues that arousal comes first and emotion comes second. For example, you're sleeping and you wake up in the middle of the night because you hear a loud noise, and your heart starts beating out of your chest. So you're having a physiological reaction to hearing a loud noise. And James Lange theory would argue that your interpretation of your physiological response, that being your heart rate accelerating, creates an emotion. So you feel fear only because your heart is racing. Cannon-Bard theory argues that arousal and emotion occur at the same time. And in our example of waking up in the middle of the night to a loud noise, Cannon-Bard theory would argue that your amygdala, which activates your autonomic nervous system, accelerating your heartbeat, happens while at the same time your cerebral cortex, in a different part of your brain, is interpreting the noise as something that is strange and something that you should be fearful of. So arousal and emotion are occurring simultaneously. The Schachner-Singer theory, also known as the two-factor theory of emotion, argues that we rely on situational context in order to label our emotions. And this theory helps to explain why 2 individuals would have different emotional reactions to the same stimulus. So for example, you wake up in the middle of the night and you hear that loud noise. Well, you wake your partner up, should you have one, and then they hear that loud noise. But they dismiss it because their cognitive interpretation of that loud noise was just the dog rummaging through the garbage again, and they're going to clean it up in the morning. No big deal. So how we interpret the situation and that stimulus, that loud noise, impacts whether or not we feel a certain emotion. The fourth major theory of emotion that I'll be going over in this lecture is known as Barrett's theory of constructed emotion. And just like we have mental concepts for fruit and mental concepts for chairs, right? We know that there's fruit and there's a variety of fruit, right? You can have bananas, apples, oranges, kiwi, on and on and on. And with chairs, there's a whole variety of types of chairs. We have mental concepts for emotion as well. So emotion is the umbrella, and then there's a variety of different emotions underneath. So according to Barrett's theory of constructed emotion, emotions are schemas that include information about how we have felt and responded to similar situations in the past. So going back into our example of waking up in the middle of the night to the loud noise, in our hearts accelerating, we're doing so, our heart is accelerating because we're predicting a threatening situation. So maybe earlier that night you had gone to bed and you had watched a horror movie before falling asleep. And in that horror movie, you witnessed something similar happening to you at this moment, right? Somebody in the movie woke up to a loud noise, and then you saw all of the blood and guts on the screen because there was an axe murderer that broke into their home. Well, you're in that situation now, even though you're not part of the movie. You wake up, your heart's accelerating because you're predicting a threatening event will happen similar to what you had witnessed in the movie. Dealing with emotion is something that we learn. And we're all guilty of, in the learning process, handling our emotions in adaptive and maladaptive ways. As we mature, we grow more adaptive ways of coping than maladaptive ways of coping. However, that's not always the case. Adaptive ways of coping, for example, help you solve problems in proactive, positive ways that don't lead to more distress. Whereas maladaptive ways of coping typically lead to more distress. So let's take this example of logging into your email account. And you have 4 attempts to log in. And if you fail to log in on the 4th attempt, your account gets frozen. And you have to wait until administration can reset your password for you. So you don't want to do that. So you're logging in and you fail the first attempt. No big deal. You're not feeling any sort of emotion. After the second attempt that gets denied, you start getting a little concerned. And then after the 3rd attempt, you start feeling a physiological reaction. You start sweating. You start breathing faster. Your heart rate accelerates. You're getting frustrated. And at this 3rd stage of the game, you have to reflect and take a pause if you're practicing adaptive coping. You pause, you take 3 deep breaths, and you calm yourself down, and you reassess, geez, what is my password? What is on the keyboard? Is everything being typed right? I wasn't paying close attention or watching the keyboard while I was typing on the previous attempts. And you find out all along the caps lock was on your keyboard. A small mistake. So you log in again after you turn caps lock off and you're able to get in. And there's no damage done with that adaptive way of coping. You took a few seconds to a minute out of your day to calm yourself down, reassess, and reflect before acting. And that helped you be successful with entering your email. Now, a maladaptive approach would be that on that third attempt, you get so frustrated, rather than pausing and reflecting and calming yourself, you just take that laptop and you throw it against the wall, and it shatters the whole monitor in a way that you can't even use it for schoolwork anymore or work. So maladaptive ways of coping now led you to more negative consequences. So you're going to have to now reinvest more money and more time into a new computer. So not only financially, but your time. You're going to have to download the new software on a new computer, make sure you can access your old files from the old computer and get those onto the new computer. So all a bunch of more frustration that comes along with coping in maladaptive ways. So it's very important that we model appropriate behavior when we deal with our emotions around others, whether that's children or adults, colleagues who are superior than you or inferior than you. All are paying attention, right? Everybody's paying attention to your behavior, and the way you model yourself gives other people permission to model themselves in similar ways around you at times. So practicing adaptive way of coping can lead you on a more less stressful path in life, and it shows that you're maturing, that you're somebody who takes time to reflect and pause before acting. Let's talk about stress. Stress is a part of life, and each and every one of us experience stress every day. And we have good stressors and bad stressors, and we have stress that lasts for a long period of time and stress that lasts only for a short period of time. But stress is good because stress can motivate us, and it gets our blood pumping, and it really does help improve performance if you have just the right amount of stress. But it can really take a toll on each of us if we have way too much stress. So learning how to manage stress and using adaptive coping mechanisms or proactive approaches can help us in the long run improve health and well-being. So we define stress as the process of perceiving and responding to an event or stimulus that appears to threaten our well-being. So as a student, having a big paper due at the end of the term can be incredibly stressful, a final paper, because this final paper determines a large portion of your grade in this course, and that may make or break your GPA or your chances of passing the course in and of itself. So if you're focused on just passing the course, that's one thing, but if you're focused on like your GPA and getting an A in the course, that's a totally different scenario, right? So the weight you place on the stress can impact not only how you attend and approach the stressor, but how you physiologically respond to this event. So maybe you're taking maybe there's a lot of stress you have related to this final paper, and it's taking an emotional and physical toll on you in ways that it might not another student. They might not be stressing out as much as you because it's not their major, right? But it's important, again, that we have stress because stress serves to motivate us. Types of stressors include traumatic and catastrophic events. Those are the most severe stressors. And examples of these are car accidents, natural disasters, sexual assaults. So these traumatic and catastrophic events aren't something that are predictable, right? They're something that happen to us, and they can manifest themselves into post-traumatic stress disorder, or what we call PTSD, where an individual goes through a trauma and ends up consistently or constantly reliving that trauma over and over, even days, months, and years later. They are kind of transported back in time to that event where the memories are very, very vivid, and so are those physiological feelings. So everything, memories come back, physiological feelings come back, and people are reliving these very emotional, traumatic events. Now, when a person develops PTSD, it doesn't get better over time. PTSD can be helped by going to therapy and meeting with a counselor. Treatment helps those with PTSD, but it doesn't cure it. And there's no way to cure PTSD. Just yet, that is. So, traumatic and catastrophic events really take their toll on people, and our emotions, our physiological responses, and our memories of those events are kind of like hardwired into our brains. It's very hard to get rid of those memories. And again, traumatic and catastrophic events can impact daily functioning, and once they impact daily functioning, such as having the ability to attain and keep employment, daily hygiene regimens, all of those daily things that you do, it could really derail a person from what their life used to be prior to that trauma. Life changes are also another form of stressors, and life changes can be good changes, right? There's a lot of good stressors out there. Getting married, getting a new job, right? Moving, having a new baby, all of those things that can be very positive life changes. The death of a loved one can be something that's more negative, but that's a life change. That's a stressor. Losing a job, that's a life stressor. It's a financial toll, right, on you and your family. So life changes and how we navigate those changes impacts the amount of stress that we experience during those transitions in life. And daily hassles, right? I said stress is part of life on the daily, right? We have traffic that we deal with. We have annoying coworkers. We have angry customers, and we have bills to pay, right? And maybe annoying children, right? So all of these daily hassles, and daily chores that turn into hassles, like making breakfast, lunch, or dinners, or making the bed and doing the laundry, those can turn into hassles because they just become so repetitive. They become stressors especially when we don't attend to them over time, and then you have 5 piles of laundry because nobody's done the laundry in the house, and you have to invest the time in finishing the laundry and attending to that. But daily hassles typically are low stress as compared to life changes and traumatic catastrophic events. There are 3 ways we respond to stress, and the first being something we've talked about in this lecture as well as previous lectures, the fight or flight response. And our autonomic nervous system revs our body up as we're preparing to not only fight or flee a situation, but also for mating and eating as well, right? So our physiological responses to stress revolve around that autonomic nervous system. We also have the freeze response, known as procrastination. And when we put things off till tomorrow and keep pushing them aside, it gives us temporary relief from that stressor, certainly, right? We have time to now do something that's more enjoyable, attend to ourselves, right? And meet and fulfill our personal needs, rather than put ourselves through stress and complete a challenging task at the moment, or work towards completing that challenging task. So it's good temporarily, and it does help us to come up with better ideas and more creative ways to approach the challenge that we're procrastinating on. But over time, especially if there's a deadline attached to something we're procrastinating on, our stress levels can just build and build and build, such as you having that final paper at the end of the term and leaving everything until the night before. That can be incredibly stressful, mentally and physically on your body. We also have tend and befriend, and we see people tend and befriend during very challenging times in their lives. So if somebody goes through a major life change, you lean on your friends for social support. And it could be something as big as a natural disaster, or something a little smaller, like moving into a new home, having a divorce. We tend to befriend those in our social network. We embrace each other, we hug each other, we're there for moral support, and that love hormone or social support hormone called oxytocin is with us, gets released when we're with other people and we're making stronger bonds through emotional support. Hans Selye, known as the father of stress research, developed this model called General Adaptation Syndrome to help explain how long-term stress or chronic stress affects the body. And the first way we experience stress is through this alarm phase. And the alarm phase occurs directly after you experience a stressor. And in this stage, people may or may not experience shock. They may feel dizzy or unable to move as their sympathetic nervous system starts gearing up. And the intense hormonal and nervous system changes that occur during this phase help to temporarily suppress our immune system. During the resistance phase, your body has responded to the shock of the initial stressor and is getting ready for action. So the stress is still there because chronic stress hasn't gone away, but your body is released, has high level of hormones. You have an acceleration of respiratory rate, heart rate, and your immune system functioning is on overdrive. You feel a lot of energy at this stage, but your body's way of maintaining itself is not sustainable. There's too much energy, your body's working on overdrive, and it's easy for you to fizzle out at this point. The exhaustion phase is when the body really begins to feel the effects from long-term stress. And at this phase, your body lacks the energy to resist the threat or act against the stressors. So your immune system can't function as well, so you might develop infections. Your cardiovascular system has been working on overdrive, so you might develop cardiovascular issues, and those are appearing at this time. Or you might get sick with other ailments and even die, because when your body kind of gives up at this point, when it lacks the energy and it's been overexerted from too much chronic stress. When chronic stress affects our immune system, it causes our bodies to release fewer antibodies, which are white blood cells that serve to kind of attack the bad cells in the body, but also heal damaged cells. So our antibodies are there to fight off infections, and when we don't have enough of them, it increases our vulnerability to illness and infection. And this can be an illness such as a variety of cancers and a variety of infections that result from chronic stress, lowering our immune system functioning. And chronic stress has also been known to increase inflammation in our bodies, lead to heart disease, depression, and even obesity, in the way that fat is distributed around the body is directly correlated with high levels of stress. So people tend to put on weight around their center as well as their trunks of their bodies when they're under high chronic stress levels. Learning ways to manage stress can help us combat the effects from chronic long-term stressors. So we have problem-focused coping, which is dealing directly with the stressor and attending to it right away. And we also have emotion-focused coping, where we respond to and try to manage our emotional and physiological responses to stressors. And psychologists agree that both forms of coping help us with managing stress, but that problem-focused coping is especially beneficial in the long term because you deal with the stressor and you get over it. However, emotional-focused coping is beneficial for dealing with stressors outside of our control. Now, there's a variety of ways we can manage our stress. And the first one is with focusing on your breathing and practicing deep breathing techniques. There's a variety that are out there where some will require you just to, take a deep breath in and let it out. And some will ask you, to hold it in for a certain amount of time, then expel it for a certain amount of time. So deep breathing exercises can be really beneficial. They help not only to calm you down, but they clear your mind. They help to re-energize your body because the way you're breathing impacts the physiology of your entire body. So it can be incredibly soothing and calming experience. And I encourage all of you to get involved with practicing some of these techniques as adaptive coping mechanisms, proactive coping mechanisms towards managing stress. Grounding the senses to refocus attention. And share this with a friend who's going through a very stressful situation. And practice it yourself. When you're grounding the senses, you're focusing on what you can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell. And by that, you close your eyes and you ask yourself, it doesn't have to be a specific number. I always say one thing. I say, what is one thing I can see? And then I open my eyes and then I record that mentally. What is one thing I can hear? What is one thing I can taste? What is one thing I can feel or touch? Maybe it's the wind blowing on me or the air conditioning in the room or the heat of the sun. And what is one thing I can smell? And doing that will transport you. I started doing that every now and then when I got incredibly stressed out. It transports you from that stressfulness, from the feeling and the weight of the stress on your shoulders to wow, I'm refocused. I feel a little bit more energy. I'm no longer thinking about that stress. For just those 30 seconds, I stopped. I took a pause, a break from thinking about that stressor. So it helped refocuses your attention. In doing so, that brief pause helps tremendously. Getting psychological distance. So asking yourself, is that problem something that truly matters in 5 days from now, 5 weeks from now, or 5 years from now? And when you can gain psychological distance, you're like, well, this matter is pretty small compared to something else, right? If I miss this deadline, it's really not going to impact me 5 years from now. It'll impact me, in 5 days when Professor Beeden grades my paper or my assignment, but it's not going to impact me 5 years from now. Certainly it's a small matter, so not too much to stress over, right? Sometimes we can be so hard on ourselves. So gaining psychological distance and putting things in perspective for how large that stressor really needs to be in our lives can really help us manage our stress levels. Asking, where's the bear? Is this a truly threatening situation? And while we're stressed out, it can feel like this is a bear, and that a bear is coming to attack us and bite us. But there's really a lot of stressors in our life that are overly inflated and cause tremendous amount of stress when they're very small issues. So when we don't, when we can step back and examine a situation and say, well, where's the bear? Is this a threatening situation? Or is there really no bear here? And when we can identify what the bear is that's causing us to be stressful, and when we can get psychological distance and ground our senses, we can then work on cognitive reappraisal. And when we practice cognitive reappraisal, we can turn something threatening into a challenge for us. Like, how am I going to overcome this threat or this challenge? And we approach it in a positive way. So reappraising the situation and not seeing it as a threat, seeing it as a challenge and something that you can get over and something that is achievable. The change in perspective impacts how that stress physiologically affects our bodies. To manage potential stressors, one can use proactive coping, learned optimism, and locus of control. Proactive coping is when you anticipate a challenge or a stressor and you take steps to prepare so that things don't get difficult. And when we practice proactive coping, it involves organizing our thoughts, our emotions, behaviors, and resources so that we can anticipate the future and any stressors that come along with that. So we're preparing for a wide variety of outcomes. And some outcomes might be good, some outcomes might be bad. So it's a different thought process than catastrophizing, where individuals will fixate on only the worst case scenario happening. Learned optimism is when individuals perceive stressors as a challenge rather than a never-ending state of stress and doom, right? And when you start thinking of stressors as challenges, you can become more motivated to problem solve and to get through these challenges. And so it's a different mindset of approaching problems and problem solving in and of itself. Optimists tend to live longer. They tend to have healthier lives. They have healthier immune systems. And they also tend to have less depression, as well as less experiences of feeling stressed out. So even though they're experiencing stress, when you're approaching stress as a challenge rather than a never-ending state of doom, you're not feeling stressed, if that makes sense. And locus of control is also beneficial because it's how one perceives how much control they have over their life. And there's an internal locus of control where a person believes that their own actions contribute to positive outcomes in life. So their own actions, their hard work, their dedication they put into something results in positive outcomes because they're working towards those goals and they have control over their goals. Whereas external locus of control is somebody who puts the control into an external state, such as luck or fate, and that, or another person perhaps, and that those things control the end outcome. So having an internal locus of control is more beneficial. We will all want to be in control of our lives, and certain aspects of our lives dictate and can influence, how we behave and how we manage our stress and emotions. And having a good internal locus of control helps one to understand their purpose as in what skills they bring to the table, and helps an individual feel accomplished at the end of the day, that they're contributing and that they have control over their own successes in life. There are many things we can do to improve our psychological well-being, and that starts with managing our emotions in adaptive ways and being able to manage our stressors. And what's most important to understand in all of this is those are things that are learned. And what might work for one person might not work for another person. So we all have to experiment with ways that help improve our own psychological well-being. Because, for example, you might sit through a meditation and it just might be horrible and it's not something that works for you. So that's not something that you have to do if it doesn't work. I'm going to share with you a few things that you might already be doing. And if you're not doing them, try them out, experiment with it, and see if it makes a positive impact on your overall psychological well-being. Mindfulness meditation is when you are focusing more on your deep breathing, and you're in a state of meditation where your awareness is driven to the breathing. But while you're doing this, and anybody who's practiced meditation can share, random thoughts might come through your head. And being mindful of those thoughts is important. And being mindful of where you are, your awareness of the present is very important as well. So thoughts come into your mind and then they leave. And other thoughts come in and then they leave, because you're not going to allow those thoughts to distract you or stress you out. So it's a practice of allowing the thought to enter your mind and allowing it to leave really quickly, because you're going to then focus on your breathing. A thought comes in, you're not supposed to be thinking about that, that stresses you out. Focus on the deep breathing, and the thought goes away. And some people who practice meditation, especially when you start as a beginner, tons of thoughts might be coming through and racing through your mind. And it's always like bouncing those thoughts away. All right? So mindfulness meditation can be beneficial. It helps clear your mind, refocus, calm you, and changes some of the brain chemistry at times through meditation, depending on which level that you're in as well. Avoid making comparisons between you and other people. And we do this all the time, especially since social media is such a big thing when we're on a Facebook or we're on Instagram or something. We compare our lives. That's a natural thing to do. But try to avoid that. What people post online and what people share with other people might not be the full true picture of what's actually going on. So people tend to share the very best of themselves. Everybody wants a good image, positive image. And so they're only going to share with you a highlight of their life, not the bad parts. So people go through ups and downs all the time. Just because someone's life might seem better at this moment than yours doesn't mean that it is, right? Be excited for people who are going through really positive changes in their life and making major changes. And be excited for yourself as well when those things happen. Just because things might have happened at a later time for you doesn't mean that you're any less than another person. Or even if it didn't work out and it didn't happen for you, you're not any different than the next person. So stop making those comparisons. It only brings your self-esteem down. Practice gratitude. Practice journaling, something that you're grateful for each day. I had my students do this in the past where we did gratitude journals, and students would find one thing each day that they were grateful for, and reminding yourself of what you're grateful for each and every day can put things in perspective, and it reminds you to focus on things that are so easily ignored. Right? Are you grateful for, somebody held the door open for you today, or somebody said something very kind to you, or a friend came over and you enjoyed laughing together. Practice gratitude. Practice understanding, kind moments exist in our world. And be grateful for the people around you in your social circle, even if your social circle is incredibly small. Be grateful for those people and those interactions you have with others. Be present and savor the moment. Get off of your devices. When you're sharing time with another person, try to be present without distractions. So this might be turning off the music or turning off the television, turning off your cell phone for the 20 minutes that you're with that individual, and really focusing in on building that relationship in the present. Even if you're by yourself, focus on your environment. Focus on who's in your environment and how you're feeling in that moment. So being present doesn't have to be being present with other people necessarily. It's just savoring the moments. Smelling the flowers, feeling the breeze outside, enjoying the silence if nobody's around, being present. Make movement a habit. Get out there and walk. Get some endorphins going in your brain and dopamine moving. Exercise. Find something that is enjoyable for you. For me, I love walking Charlie, my golden doodle, and we make it a habit because Charlie needs his exercise every day or he will go nuts. So I make it a habit every morning. First thing I do when we get up is I take the dog for a walk outside, and we go for about a mile, and we've made it a habit, so it's a routine now. And I benefit because I get the benefits of movement, and so does Charlie. He gets the benefits of his exercise for the day. Eat more healthy foods. Eat more proteins, vegetables, fruits, whole foods. Anything that's grown from the earth, anything that's natural, is better for your body than anything than food that has preservatives and chemicals in it. So try to change your diet up and see how it works for you. It's difficult, especially at first, until you find the recipes and the foods that you enjoy. And once you hone in on the types of proteins, the vegetables you enjoy, the fruits that you want to eat, start incorporating them gradually into your diet, and keep them around as snacks, so you're doing healthy snacking. That could just be one small change. Rather than whole meals, focus on healthy snacking first, and then incorporate more whole foods into your diet, into your major meals. Doing so, it's going to help your digestive system, because whole foods tend to not stay very long in your body, right? So your digestive system, along with movement, the movement helps your digestive system eliminate food. So you're going to be able to allow your body to get the nutrients from the whole foods you're eating, while at the same time expel the food through movement. And develop healthy, meaningful, and supportive relationships with other people. If you've ever heard, and you most likely everybody has by now, you become who you surround yourself with. And by that, it's a pretty strong statement. So if you're always around negative people and negative energy, that's hard to escape. And you kind of absorb it and you become negative, and you then expel that negative energy onto other people. But if you're around more positive people, people who are supportive of your goals, you're going to do much better. You're going to have better academic performance and work performance. So find the people, and it could only be 2 or 3 people that you that support you, that can be your cheerleader. Throughout this course, you have learned a variety of ways to build resilience. And what is resilience? Resilience is defined as the ability to adapt well to challenges. It's your ability to bounce back after tough situations that life throws at you. So it's a learning process, right? You don't just come out of the womb and are a resilient person. You have to go through tough and trying times, which is life, right? Stress is part of life. We go through life changes. And you have to experience life changes in order to build resilience and find ways to cope with stress and challenges that are beneficial to yourself. And put those things, the skills that you learn, inside of your toolbox. So then when tough and challenging times occur, you reach into your toolbox and say, this worked for me last time, let me try it again. So the 4 dimensions of resilience include the physical, which includes exercise, meditation, healthy habits that you learn and practice. The emotional dimension is self-awareness, self-regulation, managing your emotions in adaptive ways. The mental dimension is optimism, proactive coping strategies, and empathy. And the spiritual dimension, where you're focused on social awareness, ethical judgment, and faith and personal values. So all in all, resilience is an incredible tool that is involved with grit. It helps you to persevere during challenging times, and helps you excel in your goals rather than just give up completely. Thank you for reviewing Lecture 4. Should you have any questions, please post to the General Questions discussion forum. And I hope you have a great day.